Han Sen thought back on the turtle's bite, which was so fast that it was incredulous. With Han Sen's current speed, there was no way that he could dodge a bite like that. He knew it without even trying. As long as he was within the range of attack of the turtle, he would be killed for sure. I need to get faster and stronger. Han Sen pondered how he should achieve those two goals. Heresy Mantra could enhance his strength and speed, but Han Sen had not completed the third phase longevity yet. Therefore, he had to find another path. Sparticle was out of the question. He had to use a faster footwork. At least the footwork should allow him to dodge the turtle bite, otherwise stronger force meant nothing. He had to survive first. Han Sen did not go back to Steel Armor Shelter. Hiding the spinning spear and the skeleton's daggers in a remote cave, he teleported back to Blackhawk from Glory Shelter. Gears were not beast souls and could not be brought out of God's sanctuary. There was simply no way around it. After returning to school, Han Sen logged in the Special Squad's platform online. Currently, Han Sen had more than 100 points as the head of Special Squad, so it should be easy for him to buy several S-Class Hypergeno Arts. Han Sen slowly browsed all the available S-Class Hypergeno Arts, wishing to find some that would be helpful to improve his strength and speed. However, it was difficult to find a footwork faster than Sparticle. After all, Sparticle was already a top-notch footwork. Although there were many techniques in Panorama, they were all fundamental skills and could not enhance a certain ability significantly. Panorama focused on slow, long-term improvement of one's fitness. A significant improvement in a short amount of time should be something more like Heresy Mantra. Han Sen viewed the available S-Class footwork and did not find a single one that could surpass Sparticle. However, Han Sen did not give up but continued to look for it. He decided that he would ask for Bai Yishan's help if he could not find one. To Han Sen's surprise, after checking the footwork all afternoon, he found a super Geno art called Overload, which brought him some hope. The theory of overload was to make one's body work under extreme conditions that went beyond one's limits. It was to burn one's energy to tap into one's potentials. The more burden one's body could handle, the stronger one's force would be. It was somewhat like an overclock of the processor or graphics cards in ancient computers. It was to reset some computer components so that it ran faster than the manufacturer-specified speed, from 2.0 to 3.0, or even 3.5 or higher. However, by doing that, the burden on one's body would be heavily increased. Undertaking the overload, the body would be inclined to collapse. Technically speaking, overload could increase one's abilities without limit. However, if the body could not take it, one would die from using overload. Fitness was the key in practicing overload. The better the fitness, the greater the potentials. In addition, one must control the level of the overload. Otherwise, one's body would be destroyed. Han Sen did not have too much time to consider. Overload was the most effective way for him to improve at this time. It was even more direct than Heresy Mantra. Overload could increase the speed and strength greatly in a very short amount of time. However, Heresy Mantra had no side effects, while Overload was dangerous to practice. With Overload, Han Sen did not need to learn another footwork. When he used both Overload and Sparticle, he could probably dodge the turtle bite. Han Sen used 30 credits at the Special Squad to purchase Overload, which he was happy about. He was willing to spend on anything that would help him improve himself. The idea of becoming the first evolver with Super Geno points maxed out made Han Sen burn with passion. The Geno solution of Overload would be delivered to Blackhawk the next day, so Han Sen downloaded the tutorial of Overload first. Han Sen, what are you doing? Shi Zhikong saw Han Sen in the dorm and patted him on the shoulder. Just looking at the tutorial of some Hypergeno art, replied Han Sen casually. Could you hold on the second and do me a small favor first? Shi Zhikong asked in a wheedling tone. What favor? It can't be too time-consuming, said Han Sen with a smile. It's not. It would be so easy for you, said Shi Zhikong with his arm over Han Sen's shoulder. Aren't you a frequent visitor to the Gladiator platform? Yes, what about it? If you want to try it, you could register an account there as well. The registration fee is not high. Han Sen did not understand what the favor was. I have become a member, but, you know, I'm not that great a fighter. Shi Zhikong stuttered. Then you need to practice more. Didn't you register to practice?
Han Sen sighed.
It might be a little late for that. That's why I want to ask you a favor. Shi Zhikang blushed and told Han Sen what happened. Aren't your girlfriend from the Warframe department? When did she change her major to martial arts? Han Sen looked Shi Zhikang up and down. This hunk was much better at romantic affairs than Han Senator as far as Han Sen knew. Shi Zhikang had had 6 different girlfriends already. At this point, Shi Zhikang's girlfriend was in martial arts department and often went a gladiator with friends. Although Shi Zhikang had great strength, he could not compare to those who were in martial arts major, which was why he wanted Han Sen to back him up. All right, I intended to go on gladiator anyway, Han Sen agreed. After the two left the dorm and entered the training hall, Shi Zhikang asked about Han Sen's ID and picked a holographic device. Han Sen also picked a device and logged in. Han Sen immediately saw a friend invite from Shi Zhikang, whose ID name was King Spear, which was an okay name, but Han Sen felt a bit promiscuous since it was used by Shi. Shi Zhikang invited Han Sen into his game room. Next to Shi stood a petite, fine girl, along with many students from the martial arts department. The students were excited when they saw Han Sen, clearly interested in talking to him. The way Han Sen beat Jing Jia a while back was so impressive that all the Blackhawk students were deeply in awe of Han Sen. Shi Zhikang felt a bit upset. Initially, he wanted to brag about his close relationship with Han Sen, while his girlfriend and friends simply ignored him after seeing Han Sen. After chatting with the students briefly, Han Sen threw a glance at the two were in a combat and asked, "Are they also Blackhawk students?" "Huang Jianqiu is in my department, but I don't know the other person," said Yu Qinqin, Shi Zhikang's girlfriend. "Han Sen, do you think Huang Jianqiu could win?" asked the girl, worried. Han Sen pondered and said, "It seems that Huang Jianqiu's level is lower than her opponent. It would be hard for her to win." "Nice, at least someone knows his stuff," said a frivolous voice. The Blackhawk students turned to look at the speaker, who was a tall and slim young man with a contemptuous look on his face. He seemed too old to be a military school student, so he should be the friend of Huang Jianqiu's opponent. Han Sen looked at the person, did not bother to speak, and continued to watch the combat. The result was as Han Sen had predicted. Huang Jianqiu lost the combat and returned to the stands with a wry smile. "I'm sorry. Wins and losses go hand in hand. You can win next time," Huang Jianqiu's friends tried to comfort her. Huang Jianqiu's opponent ridiculed. "It seems that the military school students are not that much different from ordinary people like us. We thought you were stronger than this, given you come from a famous institution." These words made the students bristle. The feverish ones even sent him invites to fight. "Great, I happen to have a minute to teach you a lesson and show you that the so-called elites are nothing," said Huang Jianqiu's opponent arrogantly and accepted an invite. The Blackhawk students were cheering their schoolmate up, while the tall, slim young man sneered, "A bad fighter is a bad fighter, no matter how loud you cheer. He will lose anyway." "It is still hard to say who the loser will be," Yu Qinqin bristled. "Ha ha, I said you will lose, so you will, no matter which one of you come up." The young man laughed brutally. Although the Blackhawk students wanted to talk back, their friend was already at a disadvantage, hence they did not have any grounds for the retort. Very soon, the students lost the fight and returned to the stands with his head down. The tall and slim young men squinted at Yu Qinqin and said, "Little girl, am I right? I said you will lose, so you will. You think you're somebody after being admitted by a military school, but in fact, you're just a bunch of stupid kids. This is it. No one is my match here. I should just stop playing." The man who won the fight looked bored. Looking at their hateful faces, the Blackhawk students wanted to challenge them again. "Let me do it." Han Sen suddenly stopped their challenge and said calmly. He then sent an invite to the winner of the last round. Han Sen did not let his schoolmates continue to challenge these two, because he saw clearly that the students could not win. It was not to say that the Blackhawk students were not good, but the two young men were cheating. In Gladiator, one could choose to enter the unevolved section and evolver section regardless of one's status. Normally speaking, evolvers were not interested in entering the unevolved section. However, there were some exceptions, such as these two young men. They were nothing among the evolvers and would lose to basically anybody. However, they pretended to be the unevolved and tried to gain confidence from their unfair victories against the unevolved. Most evolvers would not deign to stoop so low, but these two were smug about it, as if they had become true masters. Although they were on the bottom in the evolver section, they probably had maxed out their mutant geno points before they evolved. Thus, for an unevolved person, they were almost invincible. No matter how good the students were, they could not beat an evolver at this stage, which was why Han Sen stopped them. Otherwise, the two scums would be even more elated. Initially, Han Sen would not bother to deal with this kind of weak evolvers. However, he would not stand and watch his schoolmates bullied like this. The young man clicked yes and entered the game with Han Sen. Carry on. Genius, carry on. All the students were cheering for Han Sen. Genius, my ass. Every one of you is rubbish in front of us, the tall, slim guy said pretentiously. He did not believe that any of these unevolved military school students could beat them. They were, after all, the evolvers. The least they could do was to bully a few military school students. And he thought even less of the genius they mentioned. It would be great to make an example out of this genius. As the countdown ended, Han Sen and his opponent entered the arena. The guy pretended to be a master and curled his finger at Han Sr. Come on, use all you got. Don't say I never gave you a chance. Thank you for the chance. Han Sen smiled and threw a punch at the young man. The young man looked at Han Sen's fist, curled his lips, smiled contemptuously, and countered Han Sen's strike with his fist. With his fitness level as an evolver, he was much stronger than a normal unevolved person. He could bully his opponents as he wanted using his advantage in fitness, the satisfaction of which made him linger in the unevolved section. As long as they did not use those hyper-geno arts that only evolvers could practice, there was no way for anyone to tell they were evolvers. People would only think that they were strong, unevolved persons. Seeing the two fists were about to clash, the young man was even more excited. Fist against fist, he could break all the bones in his opponent's fingers, and sometimes even the entire arm. As the two fists were about to bump, Han Sen turned his fist into a claw, twisted the young man's wrist, and dislocated it. The young man's arm was twisted back and had to turn his back to Han Sen. Twisting his arm, Han Sen kicked the young man in the knee pits and made him kneel. With one arm controlled by Han Sen, the young man could not even stand up, otherwise his entire arm would be wasted. As an evolver, the young man did have some remarkable abilities. He quickly hit back and tried to get rid of Han Sen's hand. However, Han Sen had improved his grappling skills tremendously since his combat with Su Zhu. An evolver with a fitness index just above 20 was not comparable to Han Sen at all. Han Sen released the young man's arm and followed the young man. Putting his arm around the young man's neck, Han Sen threw his opponent in the air head down. As his opponent was falling, Han Sen's fists hit the young man's body as fast as lightning bolts, from the face to the stomach. When the young man was about to touch the ground, Han Sen kicked him in the chest with a knee, throwing him into the air again. Sweeping up and down, Han Sen's legs became a blur, kicking the young man as if he were a punching sack. Before the young man landed, his health value was burned up. His body exploded in the air, and he was eliminated. His friend, the tall, slim guy, became dumbstruck, unable to believe that the young man would be kicked to the point of explosion by a military school student. Even though the students did not know that they were evolvers, he knew very well that it was impossible for his friend to lose. The students started to cheer and welcomed Han Sen back to the stands as if they were receiving a hero. Han Sen stared at the tall, slim young man and asked, "Do you want to fight me as well?" "No need. No need." The tall and slim guy became pale. He was not even as good as his friend. Since his friend exploded, of course he did not have the nerve to fight Han Sen himself. "Why? Didn't you enjoy this game very much?"
Han Sen sighed calmly.
Feeling nervous, the tall and slim guy exclaimed, "We are out of form today. Doesn't mean we won't win next time. Will you use your evolver's identity to fight next time? Or the unevolved?"
Han Sen asked.
Hearing Han Sen's words, the students were dazed. "Han Sen, you're saying that they are evolvers?" Shi Zhikong looked at the two young men incredulously. "You are evolvers?" All the students were mad at them. Bullying others using false identities was simply contemptible. Who is an evolver? Don't talk crap here. The two young men, of course, chose to deny being evolvers. Otherwise, they would be in trouble. "Indeed, you have not evolved much," said Han Sen casually. The two did not speak any more and chose to leave Gladiator. Han Sen, were they evolvers or not? The students were puzzled. When I went to observe in the evolver section, I have seen them before, but I'm not so sure if they are actually evolvers. Han Sen shrugged and made up an excuse. I think they are evolvers, but the scum type. Otherwise, they would not have pretended to be an unevolved person to bully others. Garbage. Shameless. Genius, your movements were awesome, especially the last round of kicks. You need to teach us when you have time. All the students were impressed by Han's senator, even scum evolvers were evolvers. It was still difficult for an unevolved person to beat them. After fighting the students a few rounds and giving them some suggestion, Han Sen entered the evolver section, because he was not the least interested in the unevolved opponents. As soon as possible he did. He received an invite to fight. Han Sen thought it was those who had lost to him, but was dumbstruck by the ID name. The ID looked very familiar, but it was not the two persons that he had beaten before. It was a one-word ID, Queen. Han Sen had never seen such an ID, but he remembered this name. A while back, Huang Fu Pingqing had taken him to a restaurant named Queen Restaurant once, which was the property of Ares Martial Hall. Han Sen saw an evolver with the nickname Queen there in the restaurant, who destroyed an evolver opponent momentarily with incredible skills and power. Is this the same Queen? With some doubt, Han Sen clicked yes and entered a fighting scene. Han Sen hoped he would see Queen from the Ares Martial Hall again. Although Han Sen knew he was not nearly as good as she was, he still looked forward to their fight. After all, they were both fighting in the virtual community, and he would not be injured while appreciating her incredible skills. Han Sen had seen many impressive evolvers on Gladiator, and some of them could beat him with just 2 or 3 strikes. However, no matter how strong they were, they did not leave him shaken like Queen did. During the countdown, Han Sen stared into the opposite direction. It's her. Seeing the tall figure, Han Sen was excited. Although she was dressed differently than he remembered and used the face blur function of the platform, Han Sen immediately recognized her at first glance. There were some people in the world that were recognizable by their special air, instead of the face or a certain body part. Queen is such a unique person. She was cold, proud, and aloof, absolutely indifferent to everything in the world, like a real queen. It was not a disguise or result of training, but a testament to her mental strength. Although Han Sen did not know why Queen would invite him to fight, her invite made him jump with joy. To win or lose was not important. Han Sen cherished the experience to fight such a strong opponent. The reason that Queen picked Han Sen was not because she saw something in him. In fact, Queen did not even know Han Sen existed. No one could make Queen do anything if she doesn't want to, except for one person, president of Ares Martial Hall, Huang Fu Pingqing. Because Qin recommended a soldier on warship to Qian Hajun became interested in the soldier. However, Huang Fu Pingqing had strict rules about Qian Hajun's training. If Qian were to fight a student from Ares Martial Hall, that would be fine. But if he were to look for someone from Gladiator, he must get Huang Fu Pingqing's approval beforehand. After hearing Qian Hajun's request, Huang Fu Pingqing did not stop him, but asked Queen to determine whether Han Sen was qualified to be Qian Hajun's opponent. Huang Fu Pingqing had high hopes for Qian Hajun and did not want anything to go wrong in his training. Huang Fu Pingqing did not want Qian Hajun's opponent to be too strong or too weak. And if Qian Hajun's opponent was not on the right path, that might affect Qian as well. Huang Fu Pingqing would not allow that to happen and trusted Queen to make the decision whether Han Sen was fit to be Qian Hajun's opponent. That was why Queen had sent the invite to Han. Senator Queen was a frequent visitor to Gladiator, so she would occasionally send an invite to Han Sen to check if he was online. Although Han Sen did not know the story behind the invite, he very much looked forward to the fight with Queen. After the countdown was over, Han Sen entered the arena. Without any hesitation, Han Sen used Heresy Mantra to strengthen the functions of his heart, blood, and chi. His fitness level was increased substantially. Without a word, Han Sen threw a punch at Queen. He was afraid that if he did not make a strike soon, he might never have an opportunity to do so. Queen was definitely much stronger than most super creatures in First God's Sanctuary. Therefore, Han Sen's punch almost carried all his strength and would take most people by surprise with his sneak attack skills. Originally, Han Sen thought Queen would fight back fiercely, which was her style. However, Queen simply dodged Han Sen's punch and did not fight back. Han Sen was dazed. Without much time to think, he threw a second punch. Facing such an opponent, it would be ideal if he could survive more rounds. The punch that cost all his strength only took Queen one step to avoid. None of his skills worked. Han Sen decided to use the skeleton's disordered rhythm. He summarized Queen's rhythm and hit her when her defense was down. However, she suddenly changed her rhythm and made his attack end up in vain. Han Sen had never met an opponent who could change her own rhythm as abruptly as this, which surprised him. No matter how good he was at prejudgment, he must base his prediction on his opponent's rhythm. Queen was able to change her rhythm as she wished, which meant it was impossible for Han Sen to determine her movement pattern. Any prejudgment was thus pointless. Although Han Sen was shocked, he remained calm and tried to use all the methods he knew to attack Queen. Although Han Sen did not know why Queen did not fight back at all, he was glad that he had this opportunity to spar with an opponent of this level. Normally speaking, evolvers of her level would not accept his invite, but this time, Queen even sent him an invite. Han Sen did not care about the reason why she did not fight back, as long as he had the chance to practice with her. However, no matter what kind of skills Han Sen had used, from sneak attacks to the skeleton skills, from 13 slashes to blade storm, nothing worked on Queen. He could not even touch the corner of her clothes. What was even more scary was that only by dodging Han Sen's attacks, Queen managed to force Han Sen into a corner. And he did not notice that until it happened. Han Sen was dumbstruck. He was the one who was making all the attacks, while Queen managed to force him into a corner simply by avoiding his attacks. He could not imagine how wide the gap was between the two of them. Eventually, when Han Sen was forced into the corner, Queen made her first attack. Jumping in the air, she kicked her legs at Han Sen's chest. Han Sen did not have any room to run. Reaching him in a second, Queen's kick was even more horrendous than the turtle bite. Han Sen immediately tried to block Queen's incoming leg with both hands, using diversion and clinging technique, hoping that he could borrow Queen's force. But it was useless. In order to use diversion, he must understand his opponent's force. To cling to his opponent, he must follow Queen's force. However, Queen's kick was so sharp and fast that Han Sen had no time to do either of that.
Bang!
Her leg kicked on Han Sen's hands and then his chest. He felt like his entire body was smashed into pieces. Then his simulated body suddenly disappeared, killed with one strike, and not even in a vital body part. There was only one possibility for the system to make such a judgment. The two parties were too far apart in strength that they were not on the same level. Han Sen returned to the waiting area and sent a friend request to Queen. If they could meet again, Han Sen wished to fight Queen at a different time. If she would not add him, he had nothing to lose. Unexpectedly, Queen accepted the request and Han Sen was delighted to see Queen in his friend list. As he was about to send Queen an invite to fight again, her name became dark. Obviously, she had left Gladiator. What a shame. But since she has already added me, I believe I will have another chance in the future, thought Han Sen, licking his lips. Queen was much stronger than the super creatures. If he had more chance to practice with her, it would be great for him to prepare himself for the future hunting. Han Sen did not bother to think why Queen would fight him. He did not use his real identity to register and even used the face blur function. No one should know who he was, and Queen should not be able to find out. Before Han Sen left the platform, he paid to download the video of the combat to his comlink. Han Sen decided to study the video and find out how Queen managed to force him into the corner. After leaving Gladiator, Queen dialed a number and made a short call. She reported to Huang Fu Shongqing her conclusion, which was she believed a soldier on warship was a suitable opponent for Qian Hajin. Although she beat Han Sen with only one strike, Han Sen's performance was out of her expectation, which was why Queen agreed to add him. In fact, Han Sen was the only person in Queen's friend list. She did not even add any student in Ares Martial Hall. In fact, in Gladiator, Queen never chatted with anyone or added anyone. The reason she agreed to add Han Sen was that despite his weak fitness, he had several techniques that were inspiring to her. For example, the way Han Sen made his attacks was sneaky enough that she was only able to tell his intention after he approached her. And Han Sen obviously had a great understanding of rhythm, which forced her to change her rhythm to cope with his attacks. In addition, Han Sen controlled his strength and his body very well, which was rare among people with his fitness level. Maybe it was because Han Sen had a similar style to someone she knew. Queen decided to accept Han Sen's friend request. After fighting Queen, Han Sen did not want to challenge anyone else. He left Gladiator and returned to the dorm to watch the video he downloaded repeatedly. Without a doubt, Queen was a formidable person and a top-notch evolver. Han Sen cannot find anything she could have done better. However, this was not Han Sen's focus. What impressed Han Sen the most was her kiting skills. It was not even a footwork, but kiting. Queen did not even use any footwork intentionally, but the spots he decided to go to when avoiding Han Sen's attacks made Han Sen feel threatened and unintentionally end up where Queen wanted him to go. That is to say, although Queen did not launch any strikes, she was able to put tremendous pressure and threat on Han Sen, so that he would want to run. Therefore, although Han Sen was making all the attacks, he ended up in the corner. Another thought made Han Sen sweat. Every spot Queen chose to go to was a spot that could threaten Han Sen, which meant it was a defect in Han Sen's movement. If Han Sen had not been through this fight against Queen, Han Sen had never thought he'd have so many defects that his opponent could take advantage of. If Queen was his enemy, and their fight was for real, Han Sen would have died 1,000,000 times. Han Sen's finding made him feel awed and excited. It was okay that one made mistakes, as long as one knew one's mistakes. In this case, Queen pointed out where he did wrong and made him see what he was blind to. Knowing what he did wrong, Han Sen knew how to make improvements. And nothing was better than that. Naturally, Queen did not do that intentionally. All she wanted to do was to force Han Sen to use all he got in order to determine whether or not Han Sen was fit to be Qian Hezhen's opponent. Even Queen did not expect that Han Sen could learn so much from fighting her. Han Sen watched the video repeatedly and was more and more impressed by Queen. Her movements looked unintentional, but were always meant for something. It was like playing Go with a master. Some stones that seemed pointless in the beginning ended up being the key to success. Those pointless stones were not in fact placed casually, but part of a macro design. Last time Han Sen saw Queen in a combat, he saw was how powerful she was. However, being her opponent this time, Han Sen learned why she was so formidable. Until the next day when Han Sen received the Geno solution overload, he closed the video of his combat against Queen. Han Sen did not know how many times he had watched the video. The more he watched, the more he gained. He decided to review it from time to time, so that he could pay more attention to his defects and weaknesses. After drinking the Geno solution, Han Sen started to practice overload. Different from heresy mantra, which emphasized on strengthening his inner organs, overload focused on putting pressure on his body. To put it in plain terms, when practicing overload, Han Sen needed to do continuous exercise to stimulate his body cells to make his body work under extreme conditions. After some thinking, Han Sen decided to practice overload on Gladiator via combats. In the holographic device, the simulated body was synchronized with his real body. Although he would not be injured, and his movements were otherwise real, Han Sen entered the Evolver section of Gladiator again and immediately received a friend request. Why would someone add me? Han Sen was slightly surprised and checked the ID. It said QZH, which he did not recognize. Han Sen still clicked yes. Very soon, QZH appeared in Han Sen's friend list. Seconds later, QZH sent Han Sen an invite to fight. It was rare that someone would invite Han Sen, so he immediately agreed. When he was waiting for the countdown, he checked out his opponent. QZH was a young man around 20 years old. Judging from his age, even if he was an evolver, he should still be new and weak. Han Sen saw that QZH did not carry a weapon and chose to not use one as well. Overload required body movements, and it would be more convenient without a weapon. After the combat started, QZH quickly rushed to Han Sen and Han Sen fought back. Very soon, Han Sen was surprised. QZH was much stronger than he thought. Han Sen estimated that he at least had a fitness index of 30. If he just evolved, then he should have evolved with his sacred Geno points maxed out. What was more impressive was that QZH not only had great fitness, but also fought exceptionally well. Every move he used was powerful. Han Sen could tell that he must have learned from a master.
Han Sen became excited.
It would benefit him greatly to spar with someone like QZH. Han Sen initiated Heresy Mantra and enhanced his fitness level greatly, otherwise he would not be QZH's match. Even so, Han Sen was still inferior to QZH in terms of fitness. After using both Heresy Mantra and Overload, Han Sen could reach a fitness level of 28, while QZH had an overall index of 30, and some items over 35. If QZH was a beginner, it was very likely that he could push his fitness index above 100, which was the goal of many evolvers. However, few people could reach that goal. Those who evolved with mutant geno points maxed out could have a fitness index of around 20 after the evolution. Those who evolved with sacred geno points maxed out would gain a sacred body and reach 30 in fitness index. After collecting geno points in Second God Sanctuary, ideally an evolver could reach 100 in fitness index, which was about as high as an evolver could reach. Han Sen was glad to fight QZH, who was strong but not strong enough to eliminate Han Sen instantaneously. Han Sen used all kinds of methods to fight QZH and stimulated the vitality of his body cells and their overload. In the beginning, overload only had limited effects. Han Sen had to make breakthroughs under the state of overload in order to enhance its effects.
Bang!
In half an hour, Han Sen was defeated by QZH. QZH was better than him in every aspect and did not leave him any chance to fight back. Han Sen did not feel upset and sent QZH an invite. QZH agreed immediately. QZH was great in terms of strength and speed, and he used many hyper-geno arts that Han Sen had never seen before. Having realized he was not QZH's match in either fitness or hyper-geno arts, Han Sen thought of one thing. Maybe I could try that. At least it will buy me more time. Han Sen thought of the kiting skills that Queen uses. Since it was hard to fight QZH head-on, the best Han Sen could do was to refine his skills and eliminate his defects. In addition, he needed to use some strategies to prolong the fight. Queen's kiting skills were like a go strategy. When he made the first step, he had to have the big picture in mind and think 10 steps ahead. Only by doing that could he lure or force his opponent to follow his design. Although it was unlikely that Han Sen could reach Queen's level in 1 or 2 months, he liked the kiting skills a lot, which was why Han Sen mimicked Queen's kiting skills during the fight with QZH. Although Han Sen performed terribly in the beginning, he was making slow progress. It was a skill that needed lots and lots of practice. Qian Hejin felt intrigued when fighting Han. Senator Qian Hejin had always practiced with the evolvers in Ares Martial Hall. Even though those evolvers had many skills, Qian Hejin would gradually get to know their movement patterns. However, the combat against Han Sen was different. Han Sen had shown him different things, such as disordered rhythm and weird strikes, sometimes even Qian Hejin's own tricks. Qian Hejin thought Han Sen was an odd fellow. Qian Hejin considered what he learned was eclectic enough, while Han Sen never ceased to surprise him, which provided him with many inspirations. Qian Hejin and Han Sen did not communicate at all, and always started the combat the minute they saw each other, which continued for days. Without any conversation, the two persons were immersed in their own practice and thought of each other as a sparring partner. Qian Hejin had spent a lot of time on Gladiator recently, but he was feeling more and more pressure. It was more and more difficult for him to defeat Han Sen. In the beginning, Qian Hejin was only intrigued by Han Sen's unexpected tricks. However, it took him more and more effort to beat Han's Senator these 2 days. He had to use all he got and seek new breakthroughs in order to win. The main issue was that Han Sen's fitness was getting better and better, which made Qian Hejin lose his advantage. In fact, it was not due to the actual improvement of Han Sen's fitness, but the progress he made in practicing overload. Now, Han Sen could perform better under overload, which made Qian Hejin feel Han Sen was getting a better physique. Under overload, the combat was dangerous to Han's Senator. Once overload surpassed his limits, there would be dire consequences. However, at this point, Han Sen's body had not reached that limit.
No.
Not fast enough. This speed is not enough for me to dodge the turtle bite. Han Sen's body was moving at a dazzling speed and his feet almost became a blur with Sparticle deployed. Although Han Sen spent most of his time on Gladiator, he would train 1 hour per day without the holographic device. In the virtual combat, he could not sense every single detail, which made the 1-hour training a must. The location Han Sen chose to use for his training was the venue of Heavy Warframe Society, which continued to be an unpopular society. After Fatty and Skinny graduated, only Han Sen and his friends remained in the society. Because of Wang Mingming, the school allowed them to keep the society in their warehouse. However, no one would come here normally. This time, however, someone was watching Han Sen train from afar. Jing Jia watched Han Sen train with complex emotions. Since he lost to Han Sen last time, Jing Jia had studied the spinning arrow even harder for a long time. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not be as good as Han Sen. Hearing about Han Sen's training, Jing Jia decided to wait for Han Sen there and talk to him. However, Han Sen directly started training since he came here, so Jing Jiwoo watched and waited. After watching for a while, Jing Jia's look had changed. Although Han Sen was simply doing a shuttle run practice, Jing Jia was shocked by Han Sen's speed. He had only seen such speed among evolvers. In all the unevolved person he knew, Jing Jia had never witnessed such speed, not even with his big brother Jing Jiwoo. Han Sen had not even used heresy mantra, otherwise he would have even higher speed. Do you need me for anything? After training, Han Sen sat down on a chair, wiped his face, drank some water, and looked at Jing Jia. He had noticed Jing Jia since the beginning. You said you would teach me spinning arrow. Is that true? Said Jing Jia, chewing on his lips. For someone as proud as Jing Jia, it was not easy to plead. Of course, if you want to learn, all you need to do was to pay me tuition, and then I would feel happy to teach you, said Han Sen with a smile. Aren't you afraid that I will learn from you and then defeat you? Jing Jia stared at Han Sen and asked. Han Sen had finished the bottle of water, threw the empty bottle into the trash can, and said, As long as it is something I have learned, I will be the best at it. If you want to learn, I could teach you any time, but you will never be able to beat me. Looking at Han Sen's expression, Jing Jia gritted his teeth and said, I want to learn. When can you start to teach me? If you pay me, we can start now, Han Sen smiled and said. Jing Jia immediately paid Han Sen what he asked. He did not believe he would lose to Han Senator with his talent. All he lacked was Han Sen's tricks. As long as he learned Han Sen's tricks, he would never lose to Han Sen again. After taking the money, Han Sen started to teach Jing Jia spinning arrow. Since Jing Jia had already practiced hard on that, it was easy to teach him. Han Sen did not reserve anything when he was teaching. He taught Jing Jia everything he needed to know about spinning arrow, and all that left to do was for Jing to practice. Like Han Sen had said, he was not afraid that others might learn from him, because he would still be the absolute champion using the same technique. In addition, spinning arrow was only one lead in his knowledge system. Although tricks were important in martial arts, what was more important was to use the right trick at the right time. Application was the key to all types of martial arts. Jing Jia had only learned how to shoot spinning arrows, but did not have his own style. Since Jing Jia was willing to pay, Han Sen did not mind earning some money. Although he did not need money at this point, more cash did not hurt. Jing Jia was afraid in the beginning that Han Sen might have some reservations and only teach him part of the tricks. However, he discovered very soon that if he had learned everything that Han Sen had taught him, he would be able to shoot spinning arrows like Han Sen did, if not better. Is he that confident? Why does he believe he would always defeat me? Watching Han Sen leave, Jing Jia did not know what to think. After returning to his dorm, Han Sen received a call from Gambler, who told him that there was a new mission assigned by the management. After reviewing the information Gambler sent him, Han Sen was surprised that there was such a person in God's sanctuary. Han Sen pondered and told Gambler that he would like to take on the mission himself. On one hand, the mission was too dangerous for most of the other members in the special squad. On the other hand, Han Sen wanted to meet that person himself, which was why he decided to take on the mission. More importantly, that person was currently in Glory Shelter. The content of the mission was to provide protection for the target when the target arrived at Steel Armor Shelter and accompany the target to the next shelter. At this point, the target was still in Glory Shelter and was going to travel to Steel Armor Shelter. Han Sen decided to meet the target before the mission began. The target was a professor named Sun Minghua. According to his profile, he was about 80 years old and had maxed out on all 4 types of Geno points. However, he still chose to stay in First God's Sanctuary instead of entering the second, because he was a professor of botany. He had done research work on the plantation in First God's Sanctuary for decades. In fact, although Sun Minghua had maxed out on his Geno points, he could not fight well. All he had was a strong physique. Sun Minghua had spent no time on practicing hyper-Geno arts or combat skills, but put all his energy on studying the plants in First God's Sanctuary. All his Geno points came from the meat provided by the Alliance. He had never been hunting. Han Sen had high respect for people like this. If Sun Minghua chose to stay in First God's Sanctuary, he would age much faster than evolvers. In the future, despite that he would gain 100 years in lifespan once he evolved, the process of aging could not be turned back. He would continue his life as an old man. Even worse, an old body was terrible for hunting. When Sun Minghua entered Third God's Sanctuary, there was no way he would survive. In addition, Sun Minghua had never practiced hyper-Geno arts. At his age, it was too late to start. His choice was to do research at the cost of his life. Han Sen could never do that, but he admired people like Sun deeply. What Han Sen did not understand was how Sun Minghua conducted his research under the condition that no technology could be used in God's Sanctuary. All kinds of equipment and formulas simply did not work in God's Sanctuary. Also, what did Sun Minghua do his research for? Speaking of plants, Han Sen thought of the turtle, which came out from the ocean to feed on the plants in Copper Mountains. Han Sen wondered what the plants meant to the turtle. Han Sen arrived at a room in Glory Shelter at the agreed time and saw Sun Minghua himself. Because he had maxed out on all Geno points, Sun Minghua did not look like an old man 80 years old. He seemed to be around 40. In addition to Professor Sun Minghua, Han Sen also saw the 3 members of Glory Special Squad who were responsible for the professor's safety in Glory Shelter. Han Sen, is it? Looks like I will become your problem soon. Professor Sun Minghua greeted Han Sen warmly. Your safety is my duty, said Han Sen. However, the 3 members in Glory Special Squad were not as friendly to Han Senator. It was still in their shelter, while a stranger Han Sen was intervening in their mission, which was upsetting to them. Han Sen knew that very well, and said to the head of Glory Special Squad, Jin Raiji, please rest assured. I only hope to follow you to Steel Armor Shelter. Before we arrive there, I will follow your commands and will not cause any trouble. Jin Raiji warmed up a little and introduced the other 2 members to Han Senator. One of them was named Lu Mingda and the other Jin Xiuli. Lu Mingda was quite a hunk and carried a huge sledgehammer that looked familiar to Han Senator. Han Sen thought about it and recognized the sledgehammer to be the sacred blood gear he gained from killing the sacred blood creature in Sand Valley. He gave the sledgehammer to Huangfu Pingqing for action, and now it had ended up in Lu Mingda's hands. The fact that Lu Mingda was able to use this sledgehammer showed that he had special gifts in terms of strength. Han Sen believed he must have also practiced a hyper-Geno art that focused on enhancing his strength. Jin Xiuli was Jin Raiji's cousin. He looked polite and easygoing. Although the 3 were a bit upset about Han Sen joining them early, they could not say anything because Han Sen had submitted an application which was approved by the management. In addition, Han Sen did not cause any trouble or voice any opinion, which made them feel better. Sun Minghua did not go to Steel Armor Shelter directly, but needed to collect some specimen of the plants near Glory Shelter first, which would take about 10 days. To Han Sen's surprise, Sun Minghua's destination was Copper Mountains. Professor, why did you become obsessed with botany in God's Sanctuary? After knowing Sun Minghua better, Han Sen knew that he was not someone hard to talk to. One night, while everyone was eating dinner around a bonfire, Han Sen voiced his doubt. Sun smiled and said, "It is more like a family tradition. My grandfather and father were all researchers in this area. I have picked up a lot of knowledge of botany since little, and have always been interested in studying it." Han Sen pondered and did not say anything. He did not know how to ask what he was wondering about. The creatures in God's Sanctuary could contribute Geno points to humans, while no one had ever gained any Geno points from eating the plants. In addition, the majority of the plants were harmful to the human body. It seemed Sun Minghua had seen through Han Sen's mind. Or maybe it was because too many people had asked the same question before. The reason I study the plants in First God's Sanctuary is to make some contributions to mankind, the professor smiled and said. The creatures in God's Sanctuary could provide Geno points, But the plants could not do the same. They were all living things, so why would they differ so much? Han Sen shook his head, as he did not have a clue. In fact, my family used to be in the study of medicine and had a focus in the ancient herbal medicine. My grandfather and father believed that since all sorts of herbs had medical values, we could also take advantage of the plants in God's sanctuary. In fact, we all know that many plants were harmful to the human body, but this further proved that these plants were effective. Sun Minghua went on and on with his explanations. The three from Glory Shelter had heard this too many times and were no longer interested, while Han Sen was intrigued. 3 generations in Sun Minghua's family had done tremendous research work on the plants in First God's Sanctuary, and the remaining interest was to find out whether the plants in God's Sanctuary could be used in medicine. Because scientific methods did not work in God's Sanctuary, Professor Sun's family still managed to achieve great results in the research. They mainly did their research through observing the reactions of the creatures after consuming certain plants. They would also keep some creatures to feed them plants to determine the effects of different plants. Of course, creatures were different from humans. Before they conducted human subject experiments, they could not publish any of their findings. However, Professor Sun Minghua shared with Han Sen about some of their findings. For example, Sun Minghua's grandfather had made a certain paste from some of the plants in God's sanctuary, which was effective on external wounds. In fact, they had many similar inventions, which were only applied in a limited scope. The main reason was that the herbal medicine they made was not much better than the man-made medicine in the Alliance. In addition, the side effects were unknown, which was why it was hard to be promoted. Han Sen had many conversations with Sun Minghua on the way. Han Sen mainly wanted to learn some common sense in case it would be useful in God's sanctuary. What's more, he was interested in the plants the turtle chose to eat and wondered what they could be used for. Unfortunately, although Sun Minghua had conducted research for decades, it was not nearly enough time to explore First God's sanctuary. Han Sen described the fruit tree to Sun Minghua, while Sun Minghua did not know what plant it was, let alone its effects. However, after hearing about the turtle from Han Sen, Sun Minghua said, "In my decades of research, I have witnessed a lot of creatures consuming plants, despite that the majority of them did not need to eat plants. According to my observation, the creatures did not consume plants to maintain life like we do. Then what do they eat the plants for?" Han Sen couldn't help asking. "I have given a lot of thought to the question, and my conclusion is that those plants might be helpful to their reproduction." Sun Minghua hesitated and said. The Glory Special Squad members did not agree with Sun Minghua. Why on earth would plants help reproduction? It's not like the plants were Viagra. However, Sun Minghua's words reminded Han Sen of the golden growler. Although the golden growler did not need plants, it consumed tons of creatures before it gave birth to its baby. Han Sen was guessing, either plants or meat. All the pregnant creatures needed to eat. If that was true, Han Sen felt like he had an opportunity. Maybe the turtle was eating to give birth as well. If it was anything like the golden growler, it would produce its life essence to feed its baby after giving birth. At that time, Han Sen would have a chance to snatch its life essence. Han Sen had only just started on practicing overload. He was afraid that the turtle might return to the ocean. If he could snatch the life essence while the turtle was giving birth, that would be ideal. Han Sen, is that turtle you mentioned still in Copper Mountains? While Han Sen was still thinking how to ask Professor Sun Minghua to check on the turtle, the professor asked him first. It should still be there. No one had seen it come out, replied Han Sen hurriedly. All right, let's go see the turtle. It might be helpful to my research. Sun Minghua decided on the schedule. The Glory Special Squad did not have much to object. They did not participate in the campaign to hunt the turtle, but they had heard about it. There were plenty of creatures in the Copper Mountains, but none of them was scary. In their opinion, the turtle should not be too dangerous since it was not fast. Only Han Sen knew that the turtle had an unbelievable speed. Han Sen did not say anything about it, and only wanted to check on the turtle from afar. In addition, Han Sen would like for the professor to determine whether the turtle was actually giving birth. Sun Minghua should be an authority in that. The group of people marched into Copper Mountains. Sun Minghua had a great physique and a sacred blood mount, so they had a smooth trip. Han Sen did not have much to do and kept chatting with Sun Minghua. Sun Minghua had spent decades doing research in First God's Sanctuary, while all his friends had left sooner or later. It was rare that a young man would listen to him like Han Sen. Since Han Sen was interested, Sun Minghua had shared a lot. Sun Minghua did his research for his interest as well as to benefit mankind. So he had nothing to hide and taught Han Sen a lot of practical knowledge, such as how to determine which plants were edible and which plants were toxic. Han Sen memorized all the information, which might be life-saving in the future. After traveling on the back of the Golden Growler, Han Sen understood that once he left the shelters, it was not easy for a human to survive in the wild. After searching in Copper Mountains for days, they finally spotted the turtle, which was chewing on some black and brown vines. "Professor, let's just stay here and watch. If we get closer, it might be risky." Han Sen stopped Professor Sun Minghua, who was approaching the turtle. Sun Minghua frowned and said, "This is a bit too far and I could see nothing. Can we get closer? Try the telescope first." "It is dangerous to approach," said Han Sen. "What can we possibly see from here?" "Go, Professor. We will protect you," said Lu Mingda after throwing Han Sen a look of disapproval. Sun Minghua wanted to get closer to the turtle. Jin Raiji checked the distance and did not object. "Professor, the sacred blood creature is something different. Last time, a lot of people from Glory Shelter were flying to hunt it, while they not only failed but also lost many men. How about we stay farther from it?" Han Sen tried to talk the professor out of it. Since he was the one who mentioned that to the professor, Han Sen was not willing to see any mishaps happening. "Han Sen, do you doubt the ability of Glory Special Squad?" said Lu Mingda, displeased. Jin Raiji and Jin Chili couldn't help frowning. Han Sen had been a good fellow so far, but now he was trying to intervene in their mission. Sun Minghua quickly said, "Han Sen, don't worry. We are not trying to approach it, just get a bit closer. It will be fine." Han Sen did not know what to say to them. He could not tell them that he was not a sacred blood creature, but a super creature. The professor had already moved and got closer to the turtle under the protection of the Glory Special Squad. "Professor, stop right here. We really cannot go any farther." Han Sen reached out her hand and stopped the professor when they were 1,000 feet from the turtle. If the turtle got mad, Han Sen was not sure if he could keep all of them safe, even if he used all he got. Sun Minghua hesitated. The distance was still not ideal for his observation. However, seeing Han Sen being so careful, Sun Minghua did not insist on going forward, but used his telescope to watch the turtle. "Damn! Han Sen, this is not steel armor shelter yet," said Jin Raiji solemnly with his brows knitted. "Han Sen, what did you say in the beginning? Why are you being so controlling now?" Lu Mingda shouted. Han Sen said calmly, "I don't mean to be controlling, but the professor is only here because I told him about the turtle. I cannot let anything happen to him, otherwise I would feel so guilty. What can happen to him? It is just a sacred blood creature. We are not going to alert it. Even if we do, we could guarantee the professor's safety. He would not even lose a hair." "This is not your business," said Lu Mingda madly. Being just 1,000 feet away from the turtle, the voice of Lu Mingda alerted the turtle, which turned around and had its eyes fixed on them. Han Sen felt a chill down his spine. He remained still and watched the turtle. Lu Mingda was still upset and wanted to add something, but Jin Raiji had also noticed the turtle's movements and stopped him. Suddenly, the turtle moved all its 4 legs and rushed to them as fast as a bird. Feeling worried, Han Sen quickly yelled at Sun Minghua, "Professor, run!" Although Sun Minghua had maxed out on all his Geno points, he did not spend any time practicing martial arts and did not react fast enough. When he summoned his mount, the turtle was already next to him. Seeing how fast the turtle was, Jin Raiji, Lu Mingda, and Jin Chuli were dumbstruck. This was not what they had heard. This turtle was even much faster than a sacred blood mount. "It's just a turtle. I will smash it right now," Lu Mingda yelled and smashed at the turtle with his sledgehammer. The sledgehammer was very heavy, but the turtle did not even dodge. Its speed became even faster, and the sledgehammer ended up on its shell, instead of its head, where Lu Mingda was aiming.
Bang!
The hammer, as large as a barrel, knocked on the turtle's shell and made a sound of metal. "Ah!" Lu Mingda screamed. The sledgehammer was a destructive weapon, so it kicked back a lot stronger than other weapons. Lu Mingda had used all his force in the strike, which failed to hurt the turtle at all. On the other hand, all the bones in his hands were broken. The sledgehammer was blown away into rocks and left a huge hole there. Not only Lu Mingda, even Jin Raiji and Jin Qiuli were shocked. They knew how heavy the sledgehammer was. With a hard strike by Lu Mingda, even a tank could be flattened. However, the turtle was not even scratched, which was frightening. Han Sen did not stand still. He immediately made a kick. It was not at the turtle, but at Lu Mingda, who was still screaming. Lu Mingda was kicked a dozen feet away. Both Jin Raiji and Jin Qiuli were shocked, but they immediately saw the turtle bit where Lu Mingda was standing so fast that they could not even tell what the turtle's neck looked like. "Don't stand here. Go!" Seeing Sun Minghua froze on his mount, Han Sen yelled, ran to the sledgehammer, and summoned the Fairy Queen. Jin Raiji and Jin Qiuli picked up Lu Mingda and wanted to run, while the turtle made another bite at Jin Raiji, who was the closest to it. Jin Raiji did not have any time to dodge, but he was fast enough to block the turtle bite with his sacred blood knife. Crack! The turtle bit the sacred blood blade and broke it in half. A sacred blood weapon was destroyed like that. The Glory Special Squad were almost scared to death. The knife was a sacred blood weapon and was broken under the turtle bite easily. They were suddenly covered in cold sweat and wanted to run. However, the turtle was so fast that they could not make it. It quickly reached out its neck and bit toward Jin Raiji, who was empty-handed. Jin Raiji had used all his energy, and there was no way he could avoid this bite. Damn it! Jin Raiji quickly stepped back, but he knew he could not make it. Lu Mingda and Jin Qiuli did not even have any chance to save Jin Raiji, given how fast the turtle was.
Bang!
Something giant and black suddenly fell on the turtle's head and knocked its head down.